What is up, guys? This is AlintheaYoh coming at you today with a talk about school servants. Now, this is just a little bit of a different format that I'm trying out, so do let me know down in the comment section below if you do enjoy it and like it, and I will look at doing it for more archetypes and just decks that I am playing in general. So today what I want to do is break down the archetype of school servants. Now that we have White Princess coming out, and indirectly we have support from the lawn mowing card, which is the grass is always taster on the other side, or lawn mowing of next door, whichever name that's going to come out for the TCG, we have that coming out, and obviously it promotes two very different builds of the deck. Now, I have seen a lot more people starting to pick up the cards just on trading groups in and around Europe and America, and it's quite interesting to see. So I thought that this video might help a lot of people who are actually struggling with the deck. I get probably at least one message a day at least asking about the school servants and how to build them for the next set. So I'll show you some example builds which you'll see behind me. But I'll just say a disclaimer, these aren't finished builds, these are just ideas, this is just a kind of preliminary testing, and once I feel comfortable with the deck I'll do an actual deck profile and then a duel diaries with it. So make sure to stay tuned for that in the future when the next set drops Raging Tempest. So to start us off, we have the standard build right behind me. You can see it's basically a 3 of every single school servant that is available to us. Each school servant puts in its own work, right through from the king to the vanilla. Without the vanilla, you can't really run the deck. This is because it's called into use with the White Prince, which sends that and a lady to the graveyard. The next brand new support that we have is White Princess. White Princess is right here, as you can see behind me, and basically counts as a school servant, and then when it's normal or special summoned, you can send a White Prince from your deck to the graveyard. Then you fuel White Prince's effects because it has gone to the graveyard, and you send 2 more. So you can see how it works, but one of the other good things as well is that its effect, secondary effect, is you can basically send it from your hand or side of the field to the graveyard to reduce the attack of all monsters, and defense of course, on the field by 300 per their level. So School Servant will only ever go down by 300 unless its level's been modulated by something like a uni-zombie. This one is a bit of a break from the mold because it's a light, and that's always something interesting, which means that you can tech in something like Blackluster Soldier, but I don't really recommend it because it's not that great. Like, Blackluster Soldier is an amazing card, but in the deck it doesn't really function amazingly, but if you want to throw it in, or you want to be Asianized, go for it. So a very standard build will consist of something very similar to this. The awkward thing about school servants is that a lot of the deck lists of the pure are going to look very similar because it's such a big engine, you have to have so many similar cards. But when it comes down to the brass tacks of it, there are a lot of different things that you can do with it. Normally what you will see in school servants is Uni-Zombie, Mizuki, and Shiranui Solitaire. Solitaire tutors out Uni-Zombie, and Mizuki is used for everything because it's an amazing, ridiculous zombie that really enables your whole deck. So you might see that I'm only running like 2 Uni-Zombie. That's simply because I'm just testing out ratios in how I use it with Solitaire. If I want to see Solitaire first over Uni-Zombie, because technically it mills out my deck a little bit more, or do I just want to see a Uni-Zombie straight away just in case, you know, it gets Solitaire gets negated or anything like that. But it's just something that I'm testing, and I would implore you to do the same. Because the deck is so tight and the space is so tight, doing these necessary tests that you might think are kind of straightforward and it's an instant 3 of is very important. If you look at the actual school servant engine right here, you can see that obviously there's a lot of cards. It consists of 18 cards right there, and you might be thinking, well, can you not cut down on some of them? Well, I would not recommend even touching King of School Servant, of course, or White Prince, because White Prince is one of those cards that is super important for the deck, obviously. In previous builds I have had White Prince and School Servant at 2. That is just simply because of the way that the formats were. Now I feel that it's really needed to be a 3 up here, so that's one thing that I would like you to consider. Lady in the White is the same as School Servant, so you need it, but at the same time Lady in the White is one of the most important cards for the deck as well. Promoting a 2/2 booty is very important. A level 3 is really good for when you have your Uni-Zombie at level 5, using both of its effects, and not only that, it stops your zombies level 3 and lower from dying by battle, except itself, and also being invulnerable to spell and trap cards, which is obviously very good depending on the type of format that you are in. White Mirror is the only one you can really argue to cut down, but White Mirror has saved me so many times in my dueling days since playing this deck since God knows how long ago, that it's really needed at 3. At worst case, it can be used as a side card that you can take out to make way for certain things. So it's something to consider, but let's not forget it's very important in the deck because it means that 1, you can allure away your King of the Skull Servant to then bring it back with White Mare, giving you an additional 1000 attack in the graveyard because White Mare obviously counts as a Skull Servant. It also means when you use a White Prince effect to banish, you can then bring back either 2 cards into the graveyard, including itself and the Skull Servant, or you can bring a lady out into defense mode to protect your Skull Servant from any battle, for example. So there's a lot of applications for it, and it's a very important card, and at worst case it's a 2000 extra boost. Then we go down to some of the non-themed cards that really support the deck. There's the Uni-Zombie, the Mizuki, and obviously the Shiranui Solitaire. I spoke about them a little bit earlier, so you see why they are so important. Next up we have things like Allure of Darkness and the Instant Fusion, the Twin Twister. You know, the spell lineup is quite different, but at the same time it's going to be very standard to what you want to see. The Foolish Burial important because, you know, it's always good to send another White Prince to the graveyard. The Allure of Darkness is because it works perfectly. The Instant Fusions because it means that you can get out, for example, a Thousand Eyes Restrict to then overlay into the Ghost Trick Doorland. It means you can also get everyone's favourite Nordin, and also you can get something like Reaper on the Nightmare, which is good if you just have, for example, normal summons your Uni-Zombie activated effect and your opponent's effect failed it, for example. You can then say, okay, well I'll just Instant Fusion out Reaper on the Nightmare, because then you can just sync up into a level 8, and Reaper on the Nightmare is also good because it means that because it has been successfully fusion summoned, because that's what Instant Fusion says, you can then bring it back with Mizuki and be able to attack your opponent directly and take cards out of their hand. So that's another really key important thing to know, and that is why that is specifically chosen over the others. The extra deck is kind of just a little bit random, so you can ignore all of that, to be honest, but you see the key important cards of it, and if Future Fusion ever comes back out for us, Star Venom will be in there because, you know, it's pretty decent, but also things like the other Fusion Zombie would be in there because it means you can just send any zombies you want to the graveyard. The trap lineup, I like to keep a very small one, but also a very powerful controlling one, so the Solemn cards are perfect for that, and that's why they're in here. Overall, I really enjoy playing the more controlled, kind of reserved version of this deck because it means that you can explode at any moment that you want, but you can hold back a little bit, and it's not just a one-trick pony like the lawn mowing versions normally are. So speaking of the lawn mowing versions, we'll go straight into them and we'll have a look. So starting us off, we'll look at the Lightsworn version, which is going to be one of the most popular versions in my opinion. You can see in here that because you have access to 60 cards, it means that you can max out on your Skull Servants, and I think you should max out regardless of what you're doing. It means that you can get your King of the Skull Servant up all in to 17,000 attack, which is absolutely brutal, and yeah, the only way that that could be more destroying is if it got Magic Cylindered, because then you ultimately cry. Ignoring the whole kind of core that we spoke about earlier, you can see from the King all the way up to the Shiranui Solitaire is a very similar lineup to what you see. I'm going to remove that aspect from the conversation now because you should all know about it, and as I said, I've gone over it. Getting down to the spicy tech, so you could say just the way that it works in this deck for lawn mowing. If you don't know what lawn mowing does, it's basically a spell card that looks at the size of your deck and the size of your opponent's deck, and then you mill cards to even it out. Obviously that works because we are playing both Lightsworns and zombies, which is Skull Servants, that both get effects in the graveyard and also work in the graveyard, so you can see how it works. The problem with lawn mowing lies in itself its own effect. If you go up against another lawn mowing deck or you don't see it, there are possibilities that you're going to have a very slow duel, and it goes against the whole ideology of the deck and how you're running it. But we put that aside because I assume everyone understands that. The standard lineup for Lightsworns is going to be your Wolf, your Lila, and your Raiden with a possible Felice in there. Now, I don't think you really need to run any other ones, and the big question and elephant in the room is, do I have to run Minerva? Minerva is one of those cards that will benefit you if you run it because you can max out on your Wolves and you can use your Raidens and your Lilas and all that. But you don't need to run it. So if you don't have a Minerva, and I don't blame you because at some point it's going to be reprinted and it's going to just be easier to get, much like our Giant Hands and such was, it's probably not worth it. If you're dying to get a hold of this type of the deck and you don't have access to Minerva and the only way you can do is buy it, I recommend don't buy it. And it's honestly not going to add a huge amount to the deck that you can't already do with the cards that are main deck. So in this particular version, I've got 2 Wolf, 2 Lila, 3 Raiden. Raiden's always going to be at 3 because it's one of the most important ones. It nets you extra mill straight away and is a tuner, which is brilliant. Lila is good for popping back row, and Wolf is just a dead card unless you mill it. Now you might say, well, you want to run 3 Wolf in this because you have so many different versions of mill cards. Well, that is true, but it's kind of one of those things that is down to you. If I was running Minerva, then yes, I would certainly run 3 Wolf. But I really don't like dead draws and I like to minimize the risk of that, so that's why I only have 2 Wolves in here. Looking at a very key important spell card for this deck, it is Left Arm Offering. Why is Left Arm Offering important? Because it means that it gets you to your goal. It gets you to the lawn mowing, and lawn mowing obviously is the whole key concept of this deck. Without it, you're running dead and you're running with no energy whatsoever. You have to have 2 more cards in your hand, you banish your whole hand and then add a spell card from your deck to your hand. But you can't set spell trap cards the turn you activate this card, but that doesn't matter for this deck because there's nothing you really want to set. So works perfectly. The standard of 3 Allure of Darkness. You have 2 Instant Fusion in this one, just testing it out and seeing. More chances you're just going to mill it anyway, but it's still a good card because it means that you can just get your milled cards back, go into easy synchro level 8s and such like that. With Pot of Desires as well in this deck at 3, it's kind of a no-brainer because you can just really turbo through your deck to be able to get to the cards that you do need, and you have a lot of cards that you can get rid of. Obviously there is a big warning label on here that if you are digging for example, a lawn mowing, you have just gotten rid of 12 cards in your deck, and that is kind of huge when you want to lawn mower them away. So important thing to note there, use it with caution, but it can be a very powerful card if you do want. A lot of people are going to ask me, do I have to run the Pot of Desires? And no, you don't. You can replace it with whatever you want. I'm trying to make this as say competitive as possible, and Desires just can't be overlooked in my opinion. Then you have some of the standard Lightsworn cards with the Solar Recharge and also the Charger Light Brigade. Standard, you run them at the max that you can. If charge is at 3, then you bump up the amount of Lightsworns that you can run, but you know, obviously it's at 2, so that stays. Then you have things like your 1-for-1, your Foolish Burial, your Burial from Different Dimension, Upstart Goblin, Soul Charge, Raigeki, and a spicy tech of Book of Life. Just going through them, 1-for-1, very standard. Bring out your King when you have like mass amounts of in your graveyard or anything that you really need, to be honest. Foolish Burial we spoke about earlier, just a choice selection of what you want to send to the graveyard. You have a Burial from Different Dimension, very important card, being able to basically make your white prince effect for free. Also, it just means that if you do banish cards from your hand with Left Arm Offering, you can just put them right back. Very important thing, but you can't use it with Desires because they have to be face-up cards, so just to point out. Upstart Goblin, consistency. It is a bit of a joke, to be honest. A lot of people do say, well, how can you have consistency in such a deck? It's up to you. You can put in whatever you like. Upstart Goblin can help you to your end goals, or you can replace it with another wolf, or whatever you like. It's down to you. I said this is just a concept deck. It's not something that I am running with straight away. I am still testing. So I just wanted to put an Upstart in there just to see if I ever saw it, to be honest. Soul Charge, obviously if you fill your graveyard with everything and you have Soul Charge in your hand, it's kind of busted. Raigeki is kind of standard. It just means that you can go for big OTKs. And also with the Book of Life, it's just a spicy tech that I like because it means that you can hold it back against your opponent while you try and bully through every single card they have, and then you Book of Life one of your kings and you just attack for game. There's no super important cards in this deck that you really need to point out other than what's behind me. A lot of them are just very standard in my opinion for what you have. You're always going to see the same type of cards being run, just with different techs. The end goal is always the same with lawn mowing decks, so that's why you're going to see a lot of the similar ones. And when we go to the Shaddoll version, you're going to see a lot of very similar cards as well, because they all have the same strategy. So we'll flip to it now. This is the Shaddoll version that I'm running, and you can see that the first 18 cards, or more than that, sorry, don't change. And that's simply because it's the School Servant engine, so we'll move on from that. You have these Shaddolls right here. You have your standard, your Beast, Squamata, Hedgehog, and Falco. These are all very important cards. Standard, anyone who has run Shaddolls or been around into the Shaddoll era or played against them will understand how they work and how good they are. The ratios are down to you. I normally like an even split of 2-2-2-2 because it just works very well. You can up a beast if you so wish to get extra draws, but obviously if you're milling multiple beasts in a single card effect or turn, only going to be activating one of them. Then you have your very standard lineup as well. As I said, you can put in a dragon, for example, if you're going against back row heavy decks, but I would recommend either having a spicy one or putting more in your side deck, because that's probably the best place for it, considering the type of decks that we're going up against now and going into in the meta. A lot of them don't have a lot of back row, currently from what I'm forecasting, but we will see, so it's up to you. Then you have your Shaddoll fusion, very standard here because, you know, it's kind of needed, and it's also really good. A very important thing as well is that if your opponent does special summon from the extra deck, or you do have a Mizuki in hand, you can bring out your own Shikanaga, which is pretty good. If you go, oh, you've got an extra deck card, I'm just gonna Shaddoll fusion, send a Mizuki to graveyard and send like a beast, for example, get a draw, and then also be able to special them from my graveyard. That's pretty good. A lot of the standard cards you will see, but there's also a reasoning. Reasoning is just, again, something that I am testing. Because the Shaddoll engine is a little bit more smaller than the Lightsworn engine, it means you do have a little bit more flexibility. Now, you can run a single Shaddoll fusion if you so wish, but it's one of those cards that it's kind of, for me, it's like, I guess I could, but I prefer it if it was at 3. So yeah, it's one of them. Extra deck is very similar, but also a very good thing with the instant fusion is because you can get to Winder, and if I said, for example, earlier, with the reference on the Reaper on the Nightmare having a level 5, well, this is the exact same thing. You have a Winder, you have a built-in archetypal card that is a level 5 instant fusion target, that if you do get Veiled or any way, shape or form like that, you can just make a level 8 synchro. So this is why Winder is very important in the deck in multiple different ways. So I was quite surprised about that. So with the left arm offering, obviously this is in here too, it means that you can shoot out a Shaddoll fusion as well if you so wish. I know you can get it by other means like Hedgehog, but it depends. It gives you that little bit of extra feasibility and flexibility for the deck that I didn't really expect it to have. So honestly, this is a very good version as well. The ways that you could break them down is the standard version that you saw earlier. That is more of a controlled, relaxed version that can pump out a lot of very controlled milling and have a better chance to be able to hit certain cards on average. With the Lightsworn version, it's an all or nothing version because you want to just OTK your opponent as much as possible. The whole idea is to throw as many resources into the graveyard that your opponent can't deal with all of them. And this one is kind of similar, except it has a certain amount of control aspect in the fact that you do have defensive cards like Winder and Shikanaga, and also just the other Shaddoll and normal monsters that allow you to disrupt your opponent. So there's a lot of different ways that you can run the deck. There's the control, advanced control, let's say this is advanced control, and then also just all-out OTK. The next question on your lips is probably, which is the best deck, AlintheaYoh? Which one are you going to run? Honestly, I don't know, but I'm going to speak about the pros and cons. So one of the pros of the Shaddolls is that you can't ignore the fact that you have lawn mowing in your deck. If you have lawn mowing, you pull it off, and your opponent has no response, like, for example, you know, a Microcosmos that would really cry, then it's just so powerful. The chances are if you mill over, like, say, 5 cards, there's a very good chance you're going to be winning straight away. One of the cons is that you're running a 60 card deck, and how consistent can you really make 60 card decks? You can put in as many draw cards as you want that are legal to you, but there's only so many that you can do, and it's only so far that it will get you. There is a problem with the School Servant deck, and in that is the amount of monsters that you have to run. The vanilla is so painful to open up with because you either decide to get rid of it out of your hand to use with, for example, Unizombie or some form of discard effects, but that means you turn off a White Prince effect in deck, which effectively means that you've got another dead card in deck, /2 if you include the lady. Unless you do some cute things with like Omega putting it back in and then milling it, that's down to you, but there are a lot of different ways that it can really hurt you. Just because of the sheer monster lineup, the sheer amount. In this there are 35 monsters and 25 spells. it can get cloggy, and that is one of the big things with both versions of the lawn mowings. It can get cloggy. But one of the big pros as well is that you do have other big boss monsters. Your Shikanaga, your Winder are also very powerful cards. And Winder against the Zodiac is obviously very powerful too, especially if you can back it up with a little extra something. Going on to the Lightsworn, you can see the Lightsworn is a lot more powerful in the fact that it's a lot more explosive. You have your wolves that can come out of nowhere to allow you to go into overlays, or you can go into your synchros, but it just means that it's adding on extra pressure. The search cards, for example, or the draw cards, for example, with the Charger Light Brigade and also the Solar Recharge are obviously very powerful spell cards too. So it means that you can really push through and extend over your opponent for that guaranteed game. But again, one of the downsides is you do have 5 possible deck cards in your hand to be able to come into your hand with the Lady in the Whites, because you don't really want them in hand, the Skull Servants, the Originals, also the Wolves, so that's more than 5, but you get what I'm getting at. It's very powerful, but obviously you need to pull off the lawn mowing, otherwise it isn't going to help, so maybe something like a Reasoning might also be useful in this, like it is in the Shaddoll. And then looking at the Original, it's so weird to look at a 40 card deck now that I've just been looking at those 60s for a good amount of time. The pro is it's more controlled, you have more control over what you're doing, the plays that you're going to make, and you're not just kind of relying on luck. But the problem is as well, it can be considered slow. If you do not get to your combo pieces, more so than the other ones, you're going to have a very slow deck. Because with the other ones, if you draw slow and then you draw into a lawn mowing or a left arm offering, it means that you just explode onto the scene very quickly. This version of the deck doesn't really have a card like that. It has obviously very good cards like Solitaire, like Unizombie, like Aloradonis that can help you get there, and also with the instant fusions, but it doesn't do the same as lawn mowing. And one card that I did forget to talk about very quickly in this version is Dark World Dealing. You might have seen it and thinking, why didn't you talk about it? It's something I'm just trying out. The idea of just getting cards out of my hands, this is just to kind of help me fix possible brick heavy hands with a lot of monsters, to be able to just put things like Mizukis that you don't want in your hand into the graveyard, or White Princes that you can't really get rid of. If you look at the extra deck, it's kind of very standard. I said ignore this one because there's a lot of different cards in here that I'm testing out, and Star Venom was just a bit of a weird test that I was doing earlier. But your standard cards are Omega, Void Ogre Dragon, Beals, and then also just your spicy level 7s, your usual ones. With the lawn mowing version, I would highly recommend Black Rose Dragon. It's very easy to make, and it also means that you can blow up the fields, but then you can utilize your graveyard, especially if you've done a lawn mowing play. So I definitely recommend Black Rose would be a standard for one of those previous ones. But going back to the original question, you've probably just asked yourself again, which one is the best one? Honestly, it depends on the meta. You look at the meta that we're having pretty much when this set comes out, it's too fast, too quick. And you need decks to be able to keep up with them. The chances are lawn mowing, if no one else is really playing lawn mowing, if the Infernoid lawn mowing deck hasn't really completely taken off, it's probably going to be a better version. Zodiac's want consistency, so they're going to be very tight to their 40 card limit. And if you go against one of those decks and you really want to go second in these versions, if you go second and they don't have an answer for the lawn mowing or a way to get to it, then it's going to be very bad for them, because even though they do have a lot of disruption on board, the chances are your milling is going to have more outs than what they have. In that case, you want to be able to have cards that will disrupt your opponent straight away from when you use the lawn mowing. So things like a Shadow Dragon to disrupt their back row or something like that. It's very important, because then it means that you can proceed with your phase 2 of your plays unkind of answered. And it also helps at the fact that it's just nice clear of mind, and it makes your opponent really sweat, because they know you've just done a big mill from a lawn mowing and already they're having to deal with cards just off the lawn mowing effect. So personally, I think the lawn mowing version might be the way to go with Zodiacs. If Zodiacs get wiped off the face of the earth and then a super adjust list, then who knows, it completely depends on the format. But that's the important thing with this deck. It depends on the format. And honestly, the biggest help out of everything is White Princess. White Princess is just so good for the deck. People just don't understand. It can single-handedly help you unbrick your hands, can single-handedly help you defeat an opponent. It's just so good. And one of the best things as well, it's a defensive card. If you just have it on the field and your opponent's trying to OTK you, you activate the effect, they have no response, you're probably not going to die that turn, especially if you activate it in the battle phase. So that is it, guys. That is the Skull Servant overview. I hope it has helped a lot of people who've been asking questions. And I'm just going to unfortunately point you at this video now if you do ask again. So if you're one of those people, apologies. I am currently very busy, so that's why last week I didn't upload anything pretty much. I've just been too busy. But yeah, so that is it. I'm going to do another version of this for a Counter Fairy deck as well, so that's a little bit further down the line. Counter Fairies hasn't been forgotten about, guys, I promise you. But I'm waiting on the new Forbidden Unlimited list or the next set because it's just so important to have them before I make deck profiles. The amount of times I've made a deck profile and then a few days later the list drops, there goes all my hard work. No one's going to look at it because it's out of date. So it's just one of those things, but don't worry, I haven't forgotten about it. Literally over there, I've been testing it the other day and this morning actually, to be honest. So yeah, but that is it. Let me know down in the comment section below what you think of Skull Servants, how you think they can rate, which is your favourite version. Is there a version that I didn't talk about? Obviously there is one card that I haven't spoken about, and that is Fairy Tale Snow cards. You can put them in, it's down to yourself. But it just goes with one of those cards that there's just so many out there that there's only so much I can really speak about in depth. But obviously that's one very good card, so don't worry, I haven't forgotten about that. It's just that there's a lot to talk about, and in this video it's talking about the key stuff, and you get what I'm on about. So as I said, let me know down in the comment section below. Make sure to give me a like, comment, subscribe, and I should catch you guys later.